Hello and welcome to Annie's Short Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Specter of Shanklin, Chine. The whispers of the past are never louder than in the quiet. Shanklin, Chine, with its cascading streams, hanging ferns, and steep cliffs, held more than just the memories of those who strolled its paths. It held secrets, tragedies, and ghosts. Chapter 1: The Invitation. Holly Arnold wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. A skeptic at heart, she was more inclined to trust the evidence in front of her than tales of the supernatural. So when an old map arrived in her mailbox, marked with a red X over Shanklin, Chine on the Isle of Wight, she laughed it off. There was no note, no sender, just the map. Her laughter faded when the dream started. Each night Holly stood in the middle of a storm. Rain pelted her skin as a roaring flood rushed through the gorge. Voices called out screams of terror and despair. She always woke just as the water pulled her under. Determined to confront her subconscious, Holly packed a bag and boarded the ferry to the Isle of Wight. She would find the marked spot, prove it was nothing, and finally get some peace. Chapter 2: Shadows in the Gorge. The day was overcast when Holly arrived at Shanklin, Chine. The gorge stretched before her, a lush and haunting paradise. The waterfall's soft roar echoed through the trees, and the air was damp and cool. Holly followed the map's markings, tracing the trails deeper into the Chine. Tourists lingered near the entrance, snapping photos, but as she ventured further, she found herself alone. That's when she saw a figure at the edge of her vision. A man in old-fashioned clothes standing by the stream, staring at her. She blinked, and he was gone. Brushing it off as a trick of the light, Holly pressed on. The red X on the map led her to a secluded clearing where a bench overlooked the water. She sat down, studying the area. Nothing unusual, just the gentle babble of the stream and the rustling of leaves. Then the air grew cold. Chapter 3: The Flood Returns. The sound of rushing water grew louder, drowning out all else. Holly stood, heart pounding. The stream swelled before her eyes, its gentle current transforming into a torrent. A shadow moved beneath the water, something massive, twisting and churning. And then the screams began. Holly turned to run, but froze as ghostly figures appeared around her. Men, women, and children, their faces twisted in terror, stumbled through the clearing, clutching at each other as they tried to flee the unseen flood. One woman locked eyes with Holly. Her lips moved, forming words Holly couldn't hear, but the desperation in her expression was clear. Holly stumbled backward, her foot catching on a root. She fell hard, her head snapping toward the water. The shadow beneath the surface grew darker, larger. It rose, forming a grotesque shape, a monstrous hand made of writhing water. It reached for her. Chapter 4: Voices of the Past. Holly awoke to darkness. The flood was gone, and the clearing was silent. The map lay beside her, soaked and smeared, but something new had appeared, a name scrawled in red ink: Fairlight Village. A chill ran down her spine. Fairlight Village was a local legend. Decades ago, a torrential storm caused a flood that swept the entire village into the sea. It was said that the villagers' spirits lingered in the Chine, unable to rest. Determined to uncover the truth, Holly returned to town and dug through the archives at the local library. She found records of the flood, photos of the village, maps, and newspaper clippings detailing the tragedy. But one article stood out: Fairlight villagers warned of danger days before flood. According to the report, an unknown man had tried to warn the villagers of the storm, but they dismissed him as mad. The villagers' scorn turned violent, and they drove him into the Chine. His body was never found, but some claimed his spirit caused the flood as an act of vengeance. Chapter 5: The Spirit's Wrath. That night Holly returned to the clearing, lantern in hand. The gorge was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife absent. She stood by the stream and spoke aloud, her voice trembling. "I know what happened. I know about the flood, about the man you blamed, if you're here." The air grew heavy, pressing down on her chest. The lantern flickered and went out. Darkness enveloped her, and the screams began anew. The ghostly figures returned, their forms more vivid this time. The woman who had spoken to Holly before stepped forward. Her eyes were filled with sorrow as she pointed toward the stream. Holly followed her gesture and saw him, the man from the photos in the archives, his face twisted in rage, his form rising from the water like a shadow given life. "You let them die," he growled. "You mocked me, ignored my warnings, and now you all suffer." Holly shouted. The spirit hesitated, his dark form wavering. Holly seized the moment. "They can't move on because of you. Let them go." The man roared, the sound shaking the ground beneath her feet. But as Holly stood her ground, the ghostly villagers stepped forward, surrounding the shadowy figure. They reached for him, their hands glowing with an ethereal light. "I know." The stream surged, then calmed, its surface smooth once more. The villagers turned to Holly, their forms fading into the mist. Thank you." Chapter 6. Restored Silence. The next morning, Holly stood at the edge of the Chine, watching the sunlight dance on the water. The gorge was still and peaceful, the heavy presence gone. As she turned to leave, she noticed something glinting in the grass, a silver locket. Inside was a photo of a woman from the visions, smiling with a small child. Holly slipped the locket into her pocket. The ghosts of Shanklin Chine had found their peace, and so had she. But as she walked away, a faint whisper carried on the wind, "Don't forget us." Epilogue. Whispers in the wind. Holly left Shanklin Chine that day, but the experience never truly left her. The locket stayed with her, a constant reminder of the spirits she had encountered and the tragedies she had unraveled. Every now and then she would hear that faint whisper again, drifting on the breeze. She began researching other stories of ghostly hauntings and unsolved tragedies, drawn to places where history's shadows lingered. What had started as a skeptic's quest for proof had transformed into a mission to uncover forgotten tales, give voices to the voiceless, and bring closure where she could. Months later, Holly was packing for her next journey when the map reappeared. She found it folded neatly on her desk, untouched since the night she had returned from the Isle of Wight. But now there was a new marking, a fresh red X drawn over another location. Beneath it, scrawled in faint letters, were the words, "We need you." Holly stared at the map, her heart racing. The locket in her pocket grew warm, and the whisper returned, soft and insistent, "Don't forget us." Taking a deep breath, Holly folded the map and placed it carefully into her bag. If there were more voices to be heard, she would listen. If there were more stories to be told, she would tell them. The spirits of Shanklin Chine had set her on a path, and there was no turning back now. As she boarded the ferry once more, she felt a strange sense of purpose. Some people ran from the ghosts of the past. Holly Arnold had chosen to chase them. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.